Hey guys, tonight we're wading deep into the mud, literally. You're about to experience what it was like to live in the soggiest, sludgiest, most moisture-loving nightmare of the Middle Ages. That's right, swamp villages, where the homes sink, the shoes rot, and your soul quietly ferments beside your firewood. And just a heads up, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're tuning in from somewhere far, drop your city and local time in the comments. I love knowing where this sleepy caravan travels. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up damp, not a little sweat on your brow, damp, no. This is my blanket grew moss overnight kind of damp. Your straw mattress has absorbed every ounce of moisture in the air, and now it's decided to share it with your spine. You shift, you squish, you sigh. You're living in a swamp village, somewhere low-lying, somewhere forgotten by sunlight and basic drainage, somewhere the Romans might have passed through and said, nope. Your hut is made of wattle and daub, a fancy phrase for sticks and mud. The roof is thatched, the floor is mud, and the windows are just holes that let in fog, bugs, and rumours. You patch leaks with reeds and prayer. It doesn't work. You step outside into ankle-deep muck. The path was once dry. Maybe. No one remembers. The whole village sinks a little more each year. Some say the church door used to be above ground. Now you descend steps to get inside. It feels like a metaphor. Everything smells faintly of mildew and something dead. Maybe a rat. Maybe hope. The air is thick with gnats. They love you. You're their holiday destination. You swat. They laugh. You trudge to the well. The bucket brings up brownish water. You try not to look directly at it. A frog climbs out. You nod respectfully. He's been here longer than you. Your neighbour waves from her door. Her hair is permanently frizzy. Her boots mouldy at the toes. She's chewing on something green and fibrous. Reed bread, she offers. You take a piece. It tastes like riverbank. You pretend to like it. Historians still argue whether swamp dwellers chose this life or just ran out of dry options. Some say they were pushed to the margins fleeing war, taxes, or angry lords. Others think they like the isolation. Fewer visitors, fewer rules, more frogs. You pass the duck pond. It's doubled in size since yesterday. The ducks seem unconcerned. A pig wallows nearby, utterly at peace. You envy him. The village centre is a plank bridge over a slightly deeper puddle. The market is 3 baskets of limp onions, a jar of fish paste, and a man selling toads for medicinal purposes. You move on quickly. Lunch is a stew, sort of. More a warm algae infusion with bits. You chew something chewy. You swallow. You keep going. Everyone here has coughs. Wet, gurgling ones. The air never quite dries out and the wood never burns clean. Smoke clings to your hair, to your clothes, to your lungs. The church bell rings. It sounds soggy. You head there anyway, mostly because the floor's slightly raised. You sit in a pew that squelches. The priest mutters something about humility. You think he's just given up. Outside, it starts raining again. It always does. You dream of hills. You dream of sand. You dream of not being constantly pruned like an old pear left in a basin. But for now, you live here, among the mosquitoes, the reeds, the mud that never ends. Your boots dissolve a little more every day. Your roof sags a little lower. and you wake up each morning slightly more amphibious. At least the frogs are friendly. The sun blazes overhead, not that it makes a difference. You're already sweating through your robes, and the stone wall you've been leaning against has started to bake your backside like a badly placed loaf of bread. Welcome to your new home, a desert monastery, where the water's scarce, the prayers are long, and your main source of conversation is a goat with a judgmental stare. You shield your eyes from the sun as you cross the dusty courtyard. The monastery stands like a stone oven, sand-coloured bricks piled atop one another, each radiating heat. There's no grass, no trees, just the occasional thorn bush clinging to life and dignity. The wind kicks up a swirl of dust, and you instinctively cover your mouth with your sleeve. Inside the monastery walls, it's cooler, slightly. The shade gives the illusion of relief, though the air is still dry enough to wick moisture from your eyeballs. You blink. It doesn't help. You're here not for punishment, but devotion. That's what they told you anyway. A chance to pray, to contemplate, to grow spiritually. Instead, you mostly grow blisters. The day begins early, well before sunrise. A bell clangs in the darkness, dragging you from your blanket and onto the cold stone floor. You shuffle into the chapel, yawning through your Latin hymns. Your knees hurt, your back hurts, your soul is still deciding whether it wants to be here. You take your breakfast silently, a bowl of dry lentils and a cup of lukewarm water that tastes faintly of clay and distant regrets. The goat watches you eat. You nod at him. He judges you. Historians still argue whether desert monasteries were truly ascetic sanctuaries, or just places where younger sons were sent to sweat out their family shame. You've stopped wondering. Your thoughts are too preoccupied with sunburn and sand. You work in the garden, though garden is a generous word. It's mostly dirt with ambition. You water the same withered herbs every day, hoping they'll forgive you for being born in the wrong climate. One of the brothers claims a miracle once made basil grow here. You suspect he just had better knees. The afternoons are worse. The sun pounds the roofs. The stone walls radiate heat inward. You try to copy manuscripts, but your ink dries faster than you can write. You once saw a monk's quill catch fire from friction. Probably an exaggeration. Probably. The silence is constant. No talking during meals, no chatting in the corridors, no gossip not spoken gossip. There's plenty of eyebrow raising and strategic coughing. You try to read, the text is faded. The goat nudges you. You nudge him back. Dinner is boiled millet and a roasted root that looks suspiciously like the last candle stub. You eat it anyway. Salt is rare. Oil is precious. Spices. Those are for nobles and myths. You pray again after dinner. Your knees creak. You wonder if enlightenment is supposed to feel this itchy. Night brings relief, or it would, if the stone floors didn't trap the day's heat like a bitter old memory. You lay on your back, staring at the ceiling, counting cracks. Somewhere, a scorpion clicks across the tiles. You pull your blanket tighter. The stars above the courtyard are brilliant, though, unfiltered by clouds or smoke. You step outside and breathe deep. It's the only time the air feels kind. The goat joins you. You both stare at the sky. You wonder if heaven has seasons. You hope so, because here, in this sun-bleached fortress of silence, life is simple, uncomfortable, and endlessly repetitive. There are no distractions, no noise, no laughter except that one time a novice monk sat on a cactus. That was glorious. But otherwise this is it. You, the dust, and the goat is winning. You climb. That's all you seem to do here. Up narrow trails, over loose stones, along jagged cliffs that don't care how tired you are. One misstep and it's a scenic tumble into obscurity. You're not entirely sure if this outpost is part of a kingdom, a monastery, or some forgotten shepherd's idea of a joke, but one thing is clear: you live on a mountain now, high up, far from anything soft. The air is thin. You wheeze, your legs burn, your tunic sticks to your back, and still you climb. Because your hut, if you can call a pile of slate with a roof, a hut is perched halfway up a ridge that laughs in the face of gravity. When you finally arrive, your boots scraping over rock and your lungs screaming for a break, you're greeted by the same view that tries to comfort you daily: endless crags, distant clouds, and a few scraggly goats chewing rocks like it's the best hay they've ever had. You're home. Life at a mountain outpost is what happens when survival meets altitude and they decide to stop speaking to each other. It's cold, even in summer. The wind howls through the cracks in your walls. Your food arrives, if at all, on the back of mules that look like they've seen things, and the only bath you'll get is falling into a snowmelt stream and regretting it instantly. This place was meant to be a watch post, once. You're not sure what you're watching for. Bandits don't come up this high. Birds don't either. The only threat you face is the terrain itself. Your jobs signal with smoke if you see trouble. But your firewood is always damp. You've tried everything: drying it, hiding it, bribing it. Still smokes like a shy candle. Historians still argue whether these outposts were strategic genius or desperate improvisations. You vote for the latter. Nothing says well-planned military installation like a latrine that's just a hole above a goat trail. Food is scarce, bread is hard, cheese is harder. You suck on dried herbs for flavour. One day you tried boiling pine needles. You've never truly recovered. You once got a shipment of salted fish. It was mostly salt. You carved it like soap, tasted like regret and ocean trauma. There's a kind of isolation here that even loneliness gets tired of. You talk to yourself. You sing to the goats. You name the stones. That one's Gregor. He's very supportive. Your only visitor this month was a merchant who got lost. He offered to trade a fur hat for a bottle of wine. You had neither. He left, mumbling about the cursed cliff village. There's a chapel up the slope, built by a mad monk who believed the higher you pray, the closer God listens. He fell off the roof during repairs. You decided to pray from inside after that. At night, the stars are blinding. They crowd the sky, sharp and silent. You stare up, huddled in your thin blanket, wondering if the stars are judging you for living up here, or laughing. You once dreamed of a valley, warm, green, with soft beds and fruit you didn't have to dry over a fire first. You woke up with a frozen toe and a nosebleed from the altitude. Still, you stay, because leaving means climbing down, and that might be worse. You sip from your stone cup. The water tastes like cold and rock. A goat bleats in the distance. The wind hisses. You pull your cloak tighter. The hearth smoulders weakly. This is your life now. Thin air, thin soup, and a mountain that never lets you forget who's in charge. The wind reeks of fish and sweat. That's your first clue. The second is the yelling. You've just arrived in a coastal town, but not the quaint, sleepy kind with sun-kissed docks and gentle gulls. No, this place is a teetering soul, salt-crusted madhouse, wedged between a jagged cliff and a sea that never stops trying to eat the land. It's loud. It's tense. and most of the people here look like they could stab you with a spoon if the mood struck. Welcome to pirate country. You dodge a drunk sailor stumbling out of a tavern and nearly step in something that was probably once a fish, or a shoe, or both. The cobbled street is uneven, wet, and littered with broken barrels, half-rotten nets, and an optimistic crab attempting escape. The air is thick with the stench of brine, ale, and lies. You live here now. This little port was once a fishing village. Then the ships came. Then the unofficial traders. Now it's a place where you sleep with a dagger under your straw pillow and keep one eye on your coin pouch at all times. The dock creaks underfoot as you make your way toward your shack. Boats bob in the water, some with sails, some with patched tarps, some with ominous red stains. Sailors unload barrels, crates, and occasionally people. Everyone's shouting. No one says please. You pass a man with a blackened eye selling genuine silk. You touch it. It feels like wet hay. He winks. Imported, he says. You nod, backing away slowly. Historians still argue whether these coastal pirate towns operated under any law at all, or if they just reinvented crime as a business model. Judging by the gambling den next to the church, you're leaning toward the latter. Your hut is at the edge of town, where the sand meets swamp. It's made of driftwood and desperation. The roof leaks. The floor creaks. The walls are full of holes. You patch them with seaweed. It doesn't help. You eat fish. Mostly fish stew, dried fish, fish paste. Occasionally, a crust of bread if you haven't gambled it away. You once found a crab in your stew. Alive. You gave him a name and let him go. He visits sometimes. Everyone here drinks. A lot. Ale, mead, suspicious rum made from sugar and regret. You don't drink much, mainly because the last time you did, you woke up on a rowboat tied to a goat. No one explained. The taverns are always open, always full, always loud. Inside, smoke curls around low beams. Men shout over dice. Someone plays a fiddle badly. Someone else juggles knives. You sip your warm beer and pray you're not next on the list of volunteers for tonight's entertainment. You once saw a duel break out over a sardine. No one was surprised. You make your living patching sails and occasionally hauling barrels you're not allowed to open. One had holes. Something hissed. You rolled it faster. Noblemen avoid this place, which is good, because the last one who arrived was found barefoot and slightly less noble the next morning. He left on a donkey, wearing a cook's apron and no memory of the previous night. You hear whispers about a ship called the Widow's Luck vanished 2 weeks ago. Last seen near this port. A sailor claims he saw it floating. Lights lit. No crew. You don't ask questions. Storms are frequent. The sea screams against the rocks. You've seen ships split like firewood. You've seen the sea claim entire docks in one night. You've seen people pray and curse and occasionally swim badly. At night, you light a candle and wedge a chair against your door, just in case. Outside, laughter turns to shouting, shouting to silence. Then laughter again. You stay put. You think of other places, dry ones, with rules, with doors that lock, with food that doesn't smell like fermented tuna wrapped in old socks. But you're here, in the salt, in the stink, in a place that pretends it's alive, but only when no one's looking. You blow out the candle, the waves crash, and you sleep with one eye open. You wake up in a city that never really sleeps because no one can. The streets are alive, not in the poetic way. in the deeply unsettling, someone just coughed blood into a puddleway. This is a trade hub, a crossroads of commerce and contagion, where exotic spices pass through, along with every disease you didn't know had a name or a smell. Your lodging is above a tannery. You didn't choose that. The landlord didn't mention it. But now you're aware every time you breathe. The scent of boiling urine, rotting hides, and despair wafts up through the floorboards. You gag, then eat your crust of bread anyway. Outside, carts rattle down cobblestones. Merchants shout in at least 4 languages. Chickens scatter underfoot. A monk preaches to no one in particular, and someone collapses against the wall across the street. You pretend not to notice. Everyone does. You're in the heart of medieval trade, which means access to cloth, metals, gems, and fish from waters you've never seen. It also means fleas, rats, sailors with suspicious rashes, and the constant gnawing worry that your next sneeze might be your last. Historians still argue whether these cities were glorious melting pots or bacterial nightmares with a strong work ethic. You think, why not both? The market is bustling. You shuffle through the crowd, past stalls selling spices, glass beads, dried fruits, and something being roasted on a spit that you hope is pork. You've been wrong before. You step around a man vomiting into the gutter. It splashes. You walk faster. You buy a fig. It tastes fine. Then you see the merchant scratch his armpit hard. You toss the rest. Disease spreads quickly here. You know the sign: sudden fevers, strange boils, coughing that sounds like gravel. The plague has been through before. It'll be back. People whisper about it like it's a relative who visits uninvited but always leaves a body count. You once saw a wagon piled high with corpses, bells jingling softly as it moved. The driver sang a love song. You can still hear it sometimes. A woman nearby hawks amulets. To ward off the Black Death, she says. You ask what they're made of. She says faith and brass. You buy one anyway. You pass a doctor or what passes for one. He wears a mask with a long beak stuffed with herbs. He's terrifying. A child starts crying. You consider joining him. Inside a tavern, it's louder, safer in a way. People pretend things are normal. They drink. They argue. They sing. But you notice the gap's empty stools, chairs pushed back like someone left suddenly and never returned. You sip your ale and keep your thoughts quiet. You remember the quarantine signs posted last season, painted red crosses on doors, families locked inside. No one checked if they had enough food, or if they were still alive. You helped deliver bread once, left it on the step. No one opened the door. There's talk of quarantine again. A ship arrived 2 days ago. Crew coughing and blistered. The mayor says it's fine. The healer says it's not. The rats say nothing. They just keep running. You head back through the alleys, holding your breath past the butcher's stall. The meat glistens in the sun. So do the flies. You once bit into a sausage here that tasted like sweet regret and bad decisions. A priest walks by swinging incense, not for prayer, for the smell. You reach your room. The tannery below is still boiling. Your pillow smells like mould. You lie down anyway. In this city, life is fast, loud, and dangerous. But the bread is warm. The ale flows, the money moves. You tell yourself it's worth it. Even if the rats know better, you duck under a crumbling archway, and dust sprinkles your hair like medieval confetti. Congratulations, you now live in a Roman ruin, or what's left of one. The town around you was once the jewel of an empire, with statues, baths, forums, and streets that actually went somewhere. Now it's just a pile of old stones pretending to be a home, and you're squatting in the bathhouse. The walls whisper ancient stories, but mostly they echo now with the sound of your stomach growling and pigeons arguing overhead. You think one of them might be cursed. Your room is what used to be a changing chamber. Mosaics still cling to parts of the wall, faded blues and chipped reds, arranged into something that once impressed senators. Now it impresses no one except the occasional rat with the taste for history. The roof is gone. You sleep under stars or rain depending on your luck, and patch gaps with branches, cloth, or anything not currently occupied by bugs. Historians still argue whether people in the Middle Ages saw Roman ruins as treasure troves or just weird leftover skeletons of a better time. You lean toward free construction materials. You use bits of broken marble as shelves. One holds your bread stale, another holds your boots damp. You suspect Caesar never had these problems. You wake to the sound of a distant bell. Not a church, someone's banging a pot to warn about a loose boar in the street again. It's a Tuesday thing. Your neighbour lives in what used to be a minor temple. Now he sells mushrooms and conspiracy theories. He says the spirits of Rome will return. You nod slowly and back away, clutching your mushroom like it might defend you. There's no central government here anymore. The empire's bones are scattered, and so is any sense of order. People govern themselves with shrugs and strong fences. Thieves common, taxes creative. One man tried to tax shadows last week. He got hit with a shovel. The aqueducts still carry water, sort of, more of a trickle, a whisper of water. You catch it in a bucket and filter it through a sock. That's just how things work here. You eat by a collapsed column. Your stew is thin, mostly roots and a questionable sausage you traded from a traveller. It smells of thyme and maybe horse. You add more thyme. Above you, remnants of carvings stare down. Gods and emperors with broken noses and blank eyes. They don't judge. They've seen worse. You venture into the old amphitheatre. It's half buried in vines, but still stands. A few villagers use it for meetings, others for shelter. Kids throw rocks at imaginary lions. You once gave a speech there just to hear your voice bounce off the stone. You sounded very important for 5 minutes. But there's something eerie here. Not quite haunted, more like forgotten. Like the stones remember when this place mattered, and now they're annoyed. You step carefully, as if the past might collapse under you. At night, the city groans. Wind howls through the cracks. You light a candle and wrap yourself in a blanket that once belonged to a noble, now patched with sackcloth and hope. The pigeons coo from the rafters. You consider naming them. Maybe Claudius, or Pupius Maximus. Your feet are cold. Your back aches from sleeping on ancient tile. But you dream of marble palaces, of clean water, of voices echoing through halls with purpose. You wake with a crick in your neck and a squirrel stealing your last fig. Living in a Roman ruin means never quite knowing whether you're surviving in history or just squatting in it. You sigh, brush off a centuries-old fresco, and head into town if 2 carts and a goat count as a town. Because no matter how many empires rise or fall, you still have to find breakfast. The dirt here tastes like iron and old battles. You didn't choose to live on the borderlands. No one really chooses this life. It just sort of happens. One day you're tilling a field. The next, you're ducking arrows and arguing with a soldier about whether your barn counts as a military outpost. You live in a place where kingdoms rub up against each other like itchy wool, and the friction is constant. One banner today, another tomorrow. You stopped changing flags on your door. It's safer to act confused. Your house is more of a suggestion than a structure stone base. Timber walls, roof patched with everything from bark to borrowed thatch. Every corner of it has been repaired at least twice, usually with things not meant for building. One beam is an old spear, another is a church pew. You're not proud, you're just cold. The nearby field has never grown well. Too much trampling, too many hooves, too much blood soaked in from last year's skirmish. The carrots come up twisted. You tell yourself it's character. You're technically under someone's protection, a baron or a duke or possibly a warlord with a very nice hat, but he hasn't visited in months. His knights ride through occasionally, loud and armoured and looking for food. They leave with your chickens. You don't protest. Historians still argue whether borderland peasants were protected by their lords or just tolerated until the taxes stopped coming. Your opinion. If protection means shouting, don't shoot. I'm local during every skirmish. Then yes, you're very protected. You once tried hiding your tools to avoid them being borrowed for battle. They found them anyway. Your hoe is now a spear. You mourn it. The soldiers are always tense. Some are drunk, some are 15, most are both. They camp near your village and leave behind fire pits, broken boots, and the kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. You learn to read the signs the way birds go quiet, the way dogs bark differently, the way the horizon suddenly fills with dust. That's when you grab your sack, your boots, and maybe your better spoon, and you run into the woods. You wait, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days. Then you come back and see if your house is still upright. You once found a stranger sleeping in your barn. He had armour, but no shoes. He offered you a silver coin for your bed. You gave him the hay pile instead. It felt like a good deal. The town down the road burned last spring. No one knows who started it. Everyone blames someone else. The few who survived moved closer to your village. Now food is tighter, tempers shorter, trust rarer. You tried planting beans this season. Something dug them up. Might have been badgers. Might have been bored soldiers. Hard to tell anymore. At night, you light no candles. The glow could draw attention. You eat your stew in the dark. You chew slowly, trying not to imagine horses' hooves outside your door. You sleep with a stick beside your bed. Not for fighting, just to tap the floor and make sure it hasn't caved in again. There's a strange peace in the in-between. You're not noble, you're not enemy, you're just there. You learn to stay invisible, to nod politely, to keep your boots ready and your mouth shut. Some days, the wind carries music, a distant lute, a song, maybe a wedding, or maybe a funeral done cheerfully. You listen. You imagine a place where no one asks who you fight for. Then you patch your roof again, because rain is coming, and rain, at least, doesn't care whose side you're on. Everything runs downhill, and you live precisely where it all ends up. Your house leans slightly to the left. It didn't always, but the ground is soft here, soaked constantly by the nearby river and everything that flows into it, which, unfortunately, includes half the town's sewage. Welcome to the river slums, where the stench never leaves, and neither do the stains. You step outside and immediately regret it. The ground squishes underfoot, not with rain, with something else. You try not to think about it. Your boots gave up weeks ago, so your socks now do most of the absorbing. You've started naming the squish zones. That puddle by the baker. That's old stinker. The dip in the alley shoe eater. Your neighbours are friendly because misery here is a team sport. You all share the same patch of sinking land and the same hopeless optimism that maybe this summer the flood won't come. It always comes. Historians still argue whether river slums formed by accident or by design, pushed out by rich landowners, or just unlucky enough to settle where the land was cheapest and the smells were freest. Whatever the case, you're here now, and so is everyone else who couldn't afford to be uphill. Laundry, a fantasy. You beat your shirts against a rock in the brown water and hope the stink trades places with the mud. It doesn't. Food, mostly fish, the kind that glow faintly when the moon is full. Bread. If the baker's feeling generous, he once threw you a loaf that had teeth marks already. You took it anyway. You once tried boiling water from the river. It smelled worse afterward. That was the day you invented fasting for spiritual clarity. Inside your home, things aren't much better. The walls sweat in summer. The roof drips year-round. Your floorboards warp with the tide, creaking like they're telling secrets. You mop with an old tunic. Sometimes it helps. You've learned to live with rats. You give them names. You establish rules. They ignore them. One lives behind the stove. You call him Bishop. He's quite bold. Rain is a disaster. Not because of the wet, but because of what the wet brings. The streets become canals. People tie planks between houses. Children float baskets down alleys like they're on grand voyages. You once saw someone fishing from their bedroom. You work as a porter. You carry crates from ships to warehouses, through streets that bubble. You've slipped. You've fallen. You've swallowed things. You try not to think about them. Bathing isn't common here, which works out, because clean water is reserved for those uphill. You once visited a tavern with an actual well. You cried a little. The barkeep gave you a cup for free. You still think about that day. You hear the rumours. Of course that rich folk dump chamber pots straight into the stream and pretend it vanishes. You know better. You're the end of that stream. Once, a healer came through offering blessing baths. People lined up, desperate. He filled a tub from the river, muttered something, then ran off with everyone's shoes. At night, the river gurgles. You lie on your warped cot, listening to the sound of water lapping against stone, wood, and regret. The wind carries the tang of rot and something sweet. You hope it's fruit. It's not. Sometimes you dream of moving uphill to where the windows have shutters and the ground doesn't slurp when you walk. Where you can breathe without tasting the air, but uphill means rent, rules, eyes that look down. Here, at least, no one pretends. You sleep, wrapped in a blanket that smells like mildew and memory. The river whispers outside, dark and endless. You whisper back. You chew slowly, carefully. The bread is hard more weapon than food, and the soup is mostly water with a hint of despair. Welcome to the famine-struck farmlands, where dinner is a negotiation with nature, and nature keeps saying no. Your field lies just outside a half-deserted village. It's supposed to grow barley, but this year, all you've managed is weeds and one incredibly judgmental crow. You named him Walter. He watches you dig with pity in his eyes. The soil is tired. You're tired. The rain either refuses to come, or it shows up all at once like an uninvited noble, floods the place, and leaves everything soggy and ruined. You tried rotating crops. You tried prayers. You even tried a dance once. The crow laughed. You remember when this land fed people. Not well, but enough. Now the ground crunches underfoot like stale bread, and every root you pull feels like a funeral. Your house well, hut is held together with faith, twine, and bits of old barn. The roof leaks, the walls groan. One side sags just enough to make you nervous when the wind picks up. You've placed rocks along the outer wall to keep it grounded. You've started naming them too. There's no money here, no coins, no trade, no hope of surplus. You barter. 1 egg for a turnip, 2 for a chunk of cheese, if it hasn't moulded into a new life form. You once gave your last apple for a candle stub. Historians still argue whether these famines were caused by climate changes, bad farming techniques, or sheer bad luck. You're firmly on team all of the above. The animals are skinny. The cows moo like they're accusing you. The pigs left last month or were eaten. You try not to think about that too much. The village priest tries to comfort everyone, but even he's chewing bark. He gave a sermon last week about God testing your hunger. Someone threw a shoe. You dig your hands into the soil, feeling for potatoes that aren't there. You find a rock. Walter caws. Children here are quiet. Not because they're obedient, because they're weak. You remember a time when their laughter filled the fields. Now it's mostly coughs and the occasional murmur. Is that soup or water? The wind brings the smell of burning. Someone is cooking rat again. You'll pretend it's something else when you're invited. A traveller once passed through offering grain in exchange for, let's call them favours. He left missing a tooth. The village may be hungry, but it still has teeth. You tried trapping rabbits. The traps caught 2 birds, 1 squirrel, and your own foot. You limped for 3 days. Walter never let you live it down. Even the dogs are thin. They move slowly now, eyeing you like maybe, just maybe, at night. You lie on straw that crackles beneath you. You pull a blanket around your shoulders, thin, patched, and about as helpful as a napkin in a storm. You dream of feasts, tables full of bread, honey, roast meat, and warm wine. You wake up biting your tongue. The stars seem brighter out here, but you're not sure if that's the hunger or something poetic. You once tried writing a poem about an onion, then you ate it. You light your candle. 1 inch left. You ration its glow like you ration your meals. Tomorrow you'll try again. You'll plant more seeds, though you know the soil's not ready. You'll chase away Walter. You'll boil water and call it soup. You'll lie to yourself kindly, because that's how famine works. It's not just hunger, it's slow forgetting. Forgetting what it feels like to be full, to be warm, to smile without guilt. You drift off, your stomach echoing in the dark. Walter watches from the windowsill. The forest closes in behind you like a door that never liked being open. You've come to the edge of the known world, or at least the part where maps stop pretending to be useful. This is the deep woods, wild, dark, and thick with secrets. Where trees whisper things you don't want to hear, and even the birds seem to caw in dialects no one's spoken in years. You live in a clearing barely big enough for your hut, which leans awkwardly against a tree stump like it lost an argument with gravity. Moss creeps up the sides. Mushrooms grow in your firewood pile, and something's been digging under the back wall. You suspect badgers, or something with thumbs. Why here? Because everywhere else said no. Outlaws, debtors, runaways, you've all ended up in these woods. where the sheriff doesn't bother and the taxis can't find you. The only rule here is don't attract attention, especially not from the forest. Your neighbours are mostly invisible. You hear them at night cracking branches, hushed laughter, maybe a flute, but you don't visit. Not after last time. That man claimed he was a forest scholar, had 7 fingers on one hand and offered you stew that glowed. You politely declined. During the day, you forage, berries, nuts, the occasional edible root. You've gotten good at spotting poison mushrooms, which is good, because your first month here was basically one long hallucination. You saw a talking rabbit. He gave you life advice. You still follow some of it. Your hut has no windows, just slits to let the smoke out and the paranoia in. You've reinforced the door with bark, bone, and a bit of iron. You found it nailed to a tree with no explanation. You didn't ask. Historians still argue whether these forest dwellers formed rogue communities or simply became forgotten ghosts of society. You think maybe both. You don't keep records. You keep warm. Your clothes smell like smoke and sap. Your hair has twigs in it. Your beard, if you've got one, has housed birds before, and honestly, you're not even mad. The company helps. You tried planting something, once beans. The deer laughed. You saw it happen. It actually laughed. Now you just trade mushrooms for dried fish with a man who appears every fortnight and vanishes before sunset. His name might be Bernard, or not. You keep a charm by the door, twigs tied with red thread, supposed to ward off forest spirits, or invite them. The instructions weren't clear, and the old woman who sold it had no teeth and a fondness for staring too long. At night, the woods creak and groan. Trees lean a little too close. You've heard stories of travellers swallowed by the moss, of glowing eyes in the canopy, of music that leads you off the path and into, well, nothing. You don't wander after dark. You don't whistle, and you never say the old names aloud. Your fire crackles. Your stew simmers nettles, some roots, possibly squirrel. You don't ask too many questions anymore. Hunger's a better seasoning than salt anyway. You once found a book buried in a stump, leather-bound, damp but legible. Inside herbal remedies, a curse or two, and a recipe for honey cakes. You tried it. It worked. For 2 whole hours. The forest smelled like home, but mostly you live quiet, careful, with your back to the wall and your ear tuned to the branches, because the woods don't like noise, and neither do the things that live deeper in. You blow out your candle, the hut sighs, something rustles, and you pull your blanket up, whispering a promise to yourself tomorrow you'll patch that back wall. Probably. Your boots sink a little deeper with every step, and the mud sucks at your ankles like it's hungry for company. Welcome to the swamp village where paths are guesses, foundations are floating, and the only solid thing is your regret. You didn't expect to stay here long. No one ever does. But the wagon broke. The horse wandered off, and the ferryman said, "You're local now." That was 3 months ago. The village itself seems stitched together from driftwood and bad luck. Houses stand on stilts, their bases buried in sludge and frogs. Rope bridges connect buildings like a toddler's attempt at weaving. You cross them slowly. The ropes creak. Something splashes below. You don't look. Your hut tilts slightly to the right. The door doesn't shut unless you kick it just so, and the floorboards bend when it rains, which is every day, at exactly the wrong moment. The air here hums. Thick, wet, heavy. It smells of mildew, pond scum, and some unidentifiable fishy sweetness that never fully leaves your clothes. Your hair has started curling from the humidity. Your socks haven't been dry since the second week. The people quiet, watchful. Some are fishers, some gatherers, and a few just are perched on porches, chewing reeds, staring at the water like it owes them money. Historians still argue whether swamp communities were settlements of necessity or escape. You lean toward accidental. This entire place feels like it fell out of someone's pocket and no one picked it up. Your food is mostly frogs, snails, and something called swamp mash. It's green, it's slimy, and it fills your belly without your consent. You once asked what's in it. An old man just smiled and tapped his nose. You tried fishing. The fish laughed, or croaked. One bit your finger and swam off with your hook. You've been buying smoked eels from a woman with 6 cats ever since. Water drips from everything: trees, roofs, your face. Mornings are fog thick, with mist curling between reeds like gossip with nowhere to go. You walk through it squinting, hoping not to step on anything alive, or recently dead. Your boots have grown mould. Your lantern rusts before your eyes, and your fingernails have started turning a pale green shade. You're not sure if that's illness or fashion. You decide to embrace it. The kids here don't laugh much, but they do swim like otters and can climb trees that look too soggy to hold weight. You tried once. You fell into a puddle that definitely moved. At night, the swamp sings. Crickets, frogs, and something deeper. Something that doesn't match anything you've heard. You pretend it's just wind. You sleep with a knife by your bed. It rusted last week. The village healer uses leeches, not for healing, for company. She talks to them. You avoid her when possible. Your roof is thatched with reeds and patched with bark. Every rainstorm is an adventure. You've gotten very good at plugging holes with old socks and a stubborn attitude. You dream of dry land, of dust, of crunchy bread and beds that don't squelch. But every time you try to leave, the paths vanish, or the ferry's out for repairs, or the fog thickens until you're turned around and back at your porch, dripping and defeated, so you stay. Because it's easier than getting lost forever in the green. Because the swamp knows your name now, and you're starting to answer when it calls. You breathe out, and it fogs in front of your face indoors. Welcome to the far north, where the concept of summer is theoretical, and ice is your most reliable companion. The village you now call home clings to the edge of a frozen bay, half buried in snowdrifts, with houses so low to the ground they look like they're trying to burrow away from the wind. You didn't plan to live here. No one really plans the north. It just swallows you. The sky is grey more often than not. The sun rises reluctantly and sets like it's in a hurry to get warm somewhere else. You sometimes forget what shadows look like. Inside your hut, everything smells like smoke, fur, and old boots. You've hung pelts over every wall. They help, barely. Your breath still fogs. Your fingers still sting. The hearth burns around the clock, gobbling up wood like it's been paid. Wood, of course, is rare. Trees don't grow here. You burn bones sometimes. You pretend it's romantic. Outside, snow squeaks underfoot sharp and dry. You wrap yourself in layers wool, leather, fur, and hope. Your boots are patched with sealskin. Your hat used to be a rabbit. Your gloves are someone else's old socks. You make do. You fish through holes in the ice, lowering lines with bits of meat or shiny bone. Sometimes you catch something, Sometimes something tries to catch you. You lost a glove that way, and a little pride. Historians still argue whether northern villages like this were feats of endurance or acts of collective stubbornness. You think it's both. You've never met people this cold and this friendly at the same time. The locals joke about the weather, only -20 t-shirt weather. They laugh. You cry, quietly, under your scarf. Your house is made of stone and snow and prayers. It creaks when the wind blows like it's scared too. You stuff moss into every crack. You once tried using butter. That was a mistake. Food is simple: dried fish, salted meat, occasionally a root vegetable so wrinkled it looks like it wants to apologize. You boil everything, because chewing hurts in the cold. Water comes from melted snow. You boil it, strain it, then boil it again. You still find the occasional bug. You've named one Gary. He's your hydration coach now. You've heard of people getting lost just steps from their door during a blizzard. You believe it. 1 minute you're fetching firewood, the next you're shouting into whiteness with snow in your teeth. You've tied a rope from your door to the outhouse. Best decision you've ever made. Speaking of the outhouse, coldest seat in the world, you time your visits with the sun, if possible. If not, well, you've learned to be quick. Mosquitoes arrive in summer like they own the place. Great clouds of them, hungry and rude. You cover yourself in mud and pray. One bit through your shirt. You wrote a poem about it, then burned it for warmth. The silence here is deep, heavy. You hear your own heartbeat sometimes. You hear the cracking of ice, the whisper of snow sliding off a roof, the distant call of birds that sound lonely. The stars, when they show, are violent in their beauty, so bright they hurt your eyes. You stare anyway, wrapped in blankets and wishing they gave off heat. You've seen the northern lights once, green flames dancing in the sky. They made you forget the cold for a moment. Then your toes reminded you. You pull your cloak tighter, stoke the fire again, count your remaining candles, whisper to the darkness that you're not afraid. You're lying, but it helps. Your skin itches before you even reach the city gate. Dust clings to everything: the walls, your clothes, your throat. The wind here doesn't blow so much as it scratches, picking up whatever dirt it can find and flinging it in your eyes like a toddler in a tantrum. Welcome to the Edge of Empire desert town, where water is more valuable than gold, and shade is treated like royalty. The buildings are squat and sun-bleached, made of baked mud and stubbornness. The streets are narrow, partly for shade, partly to funnel the rare breeze through like a whisper of mercy. You live in a back alley where the heat never quite leaves, not even at night. Your room is a single square chamber with a slanted roof and a lizard that may or may not be paying rent. You leave him bits of bread anyway. He blinks in gratitude, or judgment. It's hard to tell. You sleep on a mat. You tried a straw bed once it combusted. The walls radiate heat. You've started storing your clothes in clay pots just to keep them from cooking. You drink carefully. Water comes from a single well 3 streets over, and it's guarded like treasure. You once saw a man trade a dagger for a full jug. Another traded his sandals. You just wait in line and try not to faint. Historians still argue whether desert outposts like this were brave acts of civilization or cruel exercises in endurance. You're too sweaty to care. Your work, carrying things, usually not yours, sometimes not legal. You don't ask questions. The sun takes enough out of you without adding guilt to the mix. You eat flatbread, dates, salted meat. Spice is used sparingly, it makes you sweat more, and you can't afford the water loss. Once, a merchant gave you a chili. You cried for an hour and scared the lizard. The marketplace is a maze of awnings and arguments. People shout over bolts or cloth, spices, jewellery, and tiny birds in cages. You navigate carefully. Step in the wrong direction and you're suddenly in someone's goat pen. The goats here are heat resistant and very rude. You cover your head in a cloth soaked with hope. It dries in minutes. Your boots leave prints in the sand that vanish behind you like you were never there. Some days, that feels symbolic. Inside the mosque, it's cooler, quiet. You go there sometimes just to breathe air that hasn't been preheated by the devil's oven. You sit on the stone floor, close your eyes, and pretend you're somewhere green. The town's wealthier residents live in houses with courtyards and fountains, tiny miracles behind tall walls. You caught a glimpse once. Cool tiles, orange trees, a boy eating something cold. You almost wept. Your roof catches no rain. Not that it matters. Rain is a myth here. The sky occasionally grumbles, then goes back to baking you. You've forgotten what clouds look like when they mean it. You light no fires. You eat food cold, or sun-warmed, or occasionally sun-cooked. You once left bread out and returned to find it toasted. Upside free snack. Downside burned your fingers. At night, it's slightly cooler. Slightly. You sleep on the roof sometimes, counting stars and wishing they offered shade. The air smells of dust and citrus and quiet desperation. Your dreams are strange, mirage-like. You wake with sweat in your eyes and the taste of sand in your mouth. You spit. It changes nothing, but the wind shifts and the market hums, and the lizard moves to the windowsill to cool off. You take another sip of water, small, precious, and you begin the day again. It used to be a manor. You can still see the bones of its stone archways, ornamental carvings, the curve of what was once a staircase. But now the wood rots, the walls lean, and the only noble thing here is the owl living in the rafters who judges you with aristocratic silence. This is a collapsed feudal estate, a place that once buzzed with servants, feasts, and whispered alliances. Now it wheezes with wind, creaks with mildew, and echoes with the ghosts of better dinner parties. You arrived here after a long walk and a wrong turn. The villagers in the next hamlet said no one lives there anymore. They were half right. People don't live here. People survive here. Your room is part of a fallen pantry. The shelves still hold jars, some with faded labels, others with contents you'd rather not identify. You sleep next to a barrel of something that used to be vinegar, and now smells like philosophical regret. The roof is patchy, repaired with slate, bark, and on one memorable occasion, a discarded frying pan. You treasure it. It's the only thing that keeps the rain from dripping on your left ear at night. The kitchen's a mossy ruin. Ovens turn to bat dens. The hearth still stands, blackened and full of feathers. You once tried cooking there. The owl disapproved loudly. You eat what you can gather. Roots, berries, occasionally spoiled grain from the old stores if you dare. Once, you found a sausage under the floorboards. You don't talk about what happened after. Historians still argue whether abandoned estates like this were casualties of plague, revolt, or the noble tendency to mismanage funds while buying elaborate hats. You suspect all three. The garden's gone wild. Thorn bushes choke the old paths. Ivy devours statues of stone saints who now look vaguely surprised to be headless. You navigate with a stick and a prayer. A former wine cellar holds water now. You think it's dark. It smells metallic, and it makes your skin tingle when you touch it. You call it the potion pit and use it sparingly. The stables collapsed years ago. Horses are a memory here, so are carriages, lords, and the endless clink of silver on silver. You once found a candlestick under a pile of leaves, tarnished, dented, still elegant. You use it to stir your porridge. The owl is appalled. The only other human around is Marcy. She lives in what used to be the music room, plays a broken lute and sings to mushrooms. You've grown fond of her. You think she's 75 or 25. Time here is vague. At night the estate sighs, the walls shift, the floorboards groan. You light a candle, wrap yourself in a curtain that once hung in a ballroom, and try to imagine what it was like when people danced here. You found an old shoe yesterday, velvet with gold thread, size 4. You cleaned it. You now use it as a spoon rest. The owl judged you again. Sometimes you wander deeper into the ruins. You find rooms with doors stuck shut, mirrors warped with age, portraits faded to the point where even the eyes are tired. You speak to them. They never answer. But the silence here is companionable. It hums with memories, not malice. The stones remember footsteps, not screams. The wind knows lullabies, not laments. You wake each morning with the sun cutting through cracked glass. You stretch, brush dust off your boots, and tell the owl your plans. He never responds. Still, you talk. Because the dead may have left, but the manor listens. Your shoulders ache, and the air smells like salt and sweat. Welcome to the coastal fishing hamlet where the sea gives, the sea takes, and the sea occasionally slaps you with a fish, just to remind you who's in charge. You live in a shack nailed together from driftwood, scraps of sailcloth, and one repurposed cartwheel that now serves as a window frame. The walls breathe when the wind picks up. You call it ventilation. The roof leaks slightly less since you stuffed it with seaweed. Every morning, before the sun has the decency to rise, you march down to the rocks, net slung over your back, barefoot because your boots rotted out last spring. The tide is your alarm clock, and it's never merciful. The beach is a graveyard of shells, crab claws, and the occasional washed-up boot. You once found a seal skull. You took it home. Now it guards your door. The neighbourhood kids call it Sir Chomp. Your fingers are permanently pruned from hauling nets, gutting fish, and pulling ropes. You smell like mackerel even in your dreams. Someone once told you they liked the scent. You're not sure if it was a compliment. Food here is fish. Fish with bread. Fish with roots. Fish in soup. Dried fish. Fish tea, don't ask. And once, fish pie with a crust made from regret and desperation. You used to complain. Now you just chew. Historians still argue whether coastal peasants lived better lives thanks to seafood access, or worse lives thanks to the constant battle with storms, salt, and seagulls. You vote worse mainly because a seagull stole your dinner last night and then had the nerve to look pleased. You fish with your neighbour, a man named Talk who has 3 teeth and more stories than memories. He talks to the waves. Sometimes they answer. You don't ask questions. The village is a clutter of boats, nets, and gossip. Everyone knows everyone, and most of them owe each other something. You once borrowed a knife. You're still paying it off in herring. The sea is unpredictable. Some mornings she's calm, glassy, almost kind. Other days, she throws herself against the rocks, snarling and wild. You lost a cousin that way, or maybe it was just a story. The lines blur. You don't own a clock. The tide is your timekeeper. You eat when it's low. You sleep when the moon is full and the water sings. The lighthouse nearby hasn't worked in years. No one climbs it anymore. Too many birds, too many ghosts, depending on who you ask. You went up once, found a nest, a broken lantern, and a carved name, Milo. 1328. You whispered hello. Your clothes are stiff from salt. Your skin is cracked from wind. You rub fish oil on your hands. It doesn't help, but you do it anyway. Old habit. Children here learn to swim before they can walk. They leap off docks with wild laughter, splash in tidal pools, and come home with sea urchins stuck to their ankles. You envy their gills. The nights are filled with foghorns that don't work, waves that don't stop, and wind that whistles through holes you can never quite plug. You fall asleep to creaking beams and the occasional distant splash, hoping it's a dolphin, not another missing boat. You once tried writing poetry about the sea. She didn't like it. The next day, your best net tore in 3 places. You now stick to whistling, but you stay, because the sea is cruel, but she's the only thing that feeds you, and sometimes, when the stars scatter across the water like spilled silver and the air smells less like fish and more like dreams, you think maybe this isn't the worst place after all. Then a crab pinches your toe, and you remember. The tavern never closes, not because it's particularly hospitable, but because no one ever formally opened it in the first place. It simply is. A permanent fixture in a village built from leftovers, desperation, and barrels that once had better uses. Welcome to the shantytown that grew around a drinking hole, not beside it, around it, like mould, only louder. You arrived here by accident, followed music, or maybe it was shouting. It's hard to tell the difference here. Either way, you stayed the night, and then forgot to leave. The buildings lean into each other like drunkards at closing time. Wood warped, nails second-hand, roofs patched with canvas, broken ploughs, and in one case, an old door from a monastery. The paint still says, "Repent." The tavern sits in the middle, crooked, smoky, and smelling like ale, sweat, and at least 3 types of regret. The floor is sticky, always. The chairs have personalities. The barmaid has better aim than most nights. You sleep in the room above. It used to be a closet. Now it's home. There's a hole in the ceiling that whistles when the wind blows, which is either charming or deeply ominous, depending on your mood. You make a living cleaning mugs, sweeping floors, and occasionally dragging unconscious patrons into the alley to sleep it off. You've developed strong arms and stronger opinions about mead. Food is simple stew, bread, sometimes meat if no one asks too many questions. The stew tastes better after the 3rd drink. The bread doesn't taste at all. You're thankful. Historians still argue whether settlements like this were born from necessity or just fermented slowly around the right barrel. You suspect it's both. There's something sticky about this place, figuratively and literally. Your friends here are an odd crew. A one-eyed fiddler who only plays sad songs. A baker with no oven who sells raw dough balls for chewing. A man who claims to be a duke but sleeps under a canoe. You've stopped asking questions. At night, music pours into the streets. Fiddles, pipes, stomping boots, and laughter that's just this side of madness. Children dance in the mud. Dogs bark at shadows. The moon never judges. You once tried reading by candlelight in your room. The book was missing pages and covered in jam. It still made more sense than most of the stories told downstairs. The air always smells like smoke and spilled ale. You carry the scent everywhere. Someone once mistook you for a brewer. You didn't correct them. You've grown fond of the chaos, the way no one's really in charge. But somehow things still get done. Fences get built. Fires get put out. Babies get passed around like shared secrets. The tavern has rules unspoken, but firm. Don't steal mugs. Don't hit the bard. Don't ask about the cellar. The cellar breathes sometimes. You ignore it. Your bed is a pile of straw atop old crates. Mice visit. You've started charging them rent. They haven't paid. But they did leave you a walnut. It feels like a start. You tried to leave once. Packed a bag. Took 5 steps. Heard someone start singing your favourite tune. Turned around. You tell yourself you'll leave next week, and you won't. Because out there, things are ordered and stiff. Out there, people frown at your shoes, your laugh, your smell. In here, no one notices if you wear the same tunic 4 days in a row as long as you buy around. You fall asleep to the sound of clinking mugs, off-key songs, and the unmistakable hum of a life refusing to be boring. You wake up with hay in your mouth and the sound of shouting outside. No, not again. Welcome to the war-torn castle, an architectural marvel in a constant state of siege, patchwork, and shouting. You're not a knight. You're not even a squire. You're a stable sleeper, wall rebuilder, arrow ducker. You're here because fate or some petty noble sent you, and neither is answering your letters of complaint. The castle used to be grand. Once. Towering ramparts, carved battlements, flowing banners. Now, half the outer wall is missing, and the banners flap more out of habit than pride. You can still see scorch marks from last week's siege, black like someone tried toasting the stone and gave up. You sleep in the stable loft, high enough to avoid floods, low enough to get hit by roof leaks. The hay is itchy, the rats are sociable. There's one you've named Balthazar. He sleeps closer than your childhood dog ever did. Your first task today: haul buckets from the well because the cistern got smashed again. By cannonball, by negligence. Historians still argue whether most castle damage came from outside attackers or inside incompetence. You lean toward the second, especially since Sir Hugh tried to ride his horse through the pantry last Tuesday. Breakfast is a chunk of hard cheese, 2 slices of tougher bread, and water that smells faintly of moss. You dip the bread in the water to soften it. The bread wins. You're sent to rebuild part of the inner wall. Again. You've rebuilt this wall 4 times in 3 weeks. Every time the enemy retreats, the Lord gets inspired and demands immediate fortification. You use mismatched stone, bits of wood, and, once, an old statue of Saint Whoever. He's now part of the rampart. You pray he doesn't mind. The knights don't pay much attention to you unless they need something carried or blamed. They stride around in dented armour, boasting loudly, coughing quietly. You suspect one has fleas. You're afraid it might be you. Your job changes hourly. Haul arrows, patch leather, wash blood off the flags. You try not to ask questions, especially when it's red and still warm. Inside the keep, morale is a yo-yo. One day the Lord is declaring victory and handing out mead. The next, he's hiding under a table because he heard a cat and thought it was a spy. You found solace in routine. Bucket, stone, bread, duck, repeat. There's a siege tower parked awkwardly in the field, abandoned after the last retreat. Birds nest in it now. You've considered moving in. The view's better. Your boots are soaked in mud, horse drool, and probably worse. Your hands are calloused. Your back aches like it's composing an opera in minor key. You miss silence, not just quiet, but the absence of tension. Here, even stillness vibrates with threat. Someone's always polishing a blade, arguing about strategy, or falling off a wall. You once tried writing a song about your time here. It was 3 verses long. All of them just said why. Yet you stay. Not because you believe in the cause, honestly. No one's explained it in a way that made sense, but because leaving would mean crossing the battlefield. And you're not that brave, or stupid, depending on the day. At night, the fires flicker along the battlements. You watch the stars through the half-collapsed tower window. You pretend the arrows whistling by are owls. It helps. You fall asleep to shouting, clanging, and one knight reciting poetry to his sword. You dream of walls that don't crumble. Your knees hurt, your back hurts, your hands are permanently stained with soil. And that's on a good day. You lived at the manorial fringe, now part of a sprawling estate worked by peasants, overlooked by nobility, and micromanaged by someone who's never held a shovel. The land is fertile, sort of, but the labour endless, and your rewards measured in crumbs. Your home is a sod hut, half sunk into the ground, with a roof made of thatch and wishful thinking. The door doesn't shut all the way. There's a rock keeping it from blowing open. You named the rock Gerald. You thank him nightly. You wake before dawn. Not because you're noble or ambitious, but because if you don't, the steward knocks on your door with a stick. He calls it the motivator. You call it Harold. You've had long talks with Harold. Your job, whatever needs doing, hoeing, planting, weeding, harvesting, repeat until death or rebellion, whichever comes first. You once asked for a rest day. The steward laughed so hard he fell off his horse. You laughed too, until you remembered he wasn't joking. Breakfast is usually porridge. Lunch is porridge with a twig. Dinner, cold porridge. If you're lucky, someone drops a berry in it. You celebrate that berry. You throw it a parade. Historians still argue whether manorial systems were efficient governance or slow-motion cruelty dressed in velvet. From your end of the hierarchy, it's definitely the second. The Lord gets a roast. You get boiled grass. The Lord gets harp music. You get Harold. There's a communal barn, a communal field, and a communal sense of despair. You know your neighbours well. You smell them daily. There's not much privacy when your walls are made of mud and everyone shares a bucket. You tried growing your own garden once. The steward called it unsanctioned enterprise. You called it dinner. The garden disappeared. So did your lost spoon. You wear a tunic that's more patch than fabric. Your boots have holes the size of optimism. You fill them with straw, which lasts about half a morning. You know exactly which field turns to swamp after rain, which corner grows the least rocks, and which tree you can nap under for 9 seconds before someone yells at you. The noble family up in the manor house appears twice a year, once for taxes, once for inspection. They wear shoes worth more than your entire shack. One child pointed at you once and said, "That one looks broken." You agreed. There's a priest in the village who tries to give hope. You prefer his brother, the drunk. At least he tells better stories. You own a spoon, half a blanket, and a comb missing most of its teeth. You guard them like treasure. They're your luxury collection. Occasionally, someone vanishes, a runaway, maybe, or sickness, or they just walked into the forest and didn't come back. No one talks about it. You just take their spot in the work rotation. At night, you lie on straw that creaks beneath your ribs and try to stretch without falling off the edge of your bed, which is just a raised plank on rocks. Gerald sleeps near your feet, loyal as ever. You dream of food you don't have to grow, of clothes without holes, of a world where Harold gets lost in the woods. You wake up before the sun, again, because porridge doesn't grow itself, and fields don't care how tired you are. You hold your breath and count 1, 2, 3 before the hammer drops again. Bang! The sound rings through the narrow streets like a church bell stuck on panic. Welcome to the mining town, where the walls are black, the air is sharp, and everyone's teeth are either missing or stained with soot. The mine sits like a wound at the edge of the valley open, dark, humming with menace. You descend into it each day like a prayer you don't believe in anymore. Down the rickety ladder, into the tunnels, where even candles seem nervous. You live in a shack built against a rock face, 1 room, 4 planks, a roof held down by stones and optimism. The wind whistles through the cracks. You whistle back, keeps you sane. Your boots crunch as you walk. Dust everywhere, on your clothes, in your hair, between your teeth. You spit, and it's black. You sneeze, and the walls shudder. You haven't seen your natural skin tone in months. Mornings begin with a horn, then the trudge. Down the hill, into the hole. You carry a pickaxe that's older than you. It used to belong to a man named Hob. Hob's no longer with us. The pickaxe outlived him. So did the mine. You chip at the walls for hours. Sometimes rock falls. Sometimes just your spirits. There's no treasure here. Just iron and pain. And cold coal in everything, like a guest who doesn't know when to leave. Historians still argue whether medieval mines were centres of economic power or premature graves. You vote for graves. Especially after the last collapse, when the foreman just said, "Fill it in," and handed out new helmets. The others barely talk. Coughs say more than words. You communicate in grunts and shoulder taps. You all know what needs doing. No speech is required. Lunch is bread stuffed with lard. Occasionally, dried peas. The bread breaks your teeth. The peas break your patience. You eat quickly, because breaks make you soft. You wear a headcloth to keep the dust out of your hair. It doesn't work. You tie it anyway. Small rituals matter. They remind you you're still a person, not just a mole with debts. The mine smells of sweat, sulphur, and something you don't have a name for. When the air feels thick, you leave. You don't ask questions. You've seen what happens to people who ignore the heaviness. The foreman yells a lot. You nod and pretend to listen. He has a stick and a book. You're not sure he can read the book. You're very sure he enjoys the stick. You once saw light bounce off a bit of pyrite in the wall. Fool's gold. Your heart jumped before your brain caught up. You laughed for 10 minutes, then cried, then laughed again. The mine does that to people. Your hands are cracked. Your nails are black. You soak them in vinegar to soften the grime. The vinegar turns grey. You pretend it's a magic trick. At night, you lie on a cot that groans louder than the mine carts. You stretch your legs and feel the echo of pickaxe strikes in your spine. You try not to dream of cave-ins. You count your breaths before sleep. Still alive. still breathing. You remind yourself that above ground, the stars still shine. You just haven't seen them in a while. You squint up at the tower, and it squints back. Not literally, but it sure feels like it. Perched on a cliff, looming like a judge with bad posture, this monastery-turned-prison now holds you and a dozen others in a state of reluctant holiness. Welcome to life as a detained sinner under ecclesiastical supervision. Monastic silence, with a side of chains. You didn't plan to end up here. No one does. One wrong sermon, one debt unpaid, one accusation whispered in the right ear, and suddenly you're behind stone walls, chewing lentils and confessing things you didn't even do just to get out of dish duty. Your cell has a window. Sort of. It's more of a slit too narrow to escape through, too wide to block the wind. Rain visits often. You've named the draft Gerald II. You still miss the rock from your sod hut. The rules here are strict. Silence from dusk to dawn. Prayer 6 times a day. Bread once. Meat never. Laughter. Not technically banned, but extremely discouraged. You smile once Brother Arnold writes your name on a parchment. You don't ask why. Mornings begin with a bell so loud it feels like a judgment. You rise from your straw bed, pull on your robe, and shuffle to chapel. There, you chant badly. Everyone does. The echo in the stone room turns even your most pious effort into a frog impersonation. Your duties rotate kitchen scrubber, cloister sweeper, manuscript copier, sheep shoer. You've come to prefer the sheep. They don't judge your past, just your cabbage breath. Historians still argue whether these prison monasteries were acts of mercy or manipulation. You just know the soup is always cold, and the abbot's smile never reaches his eyes. The other inmates, monks are a mix of the truly devout, the politically unlucky, and the overly sarcastic. You suspect at least 3 are faking piety. You suspect yourself. The food is grey. That's not a metaphor. The stew is grey. The bread is grey. The cheese on rare days is grey with green spots. You eat it all. Your standards packed up and left weeks ago. At night, you hear whispers through the walls, confessions, prayers, arguments with invisible saints. You listen. Sometimes you respond. You think Brother Cuthbert is convinced you're the voice of St. Agnes? You encourage this. Once a week, the bishop visits. His hat is twice the size of your dignity. He asks questions. You give vague, holy answers. He nods. You go back to scrubbing candle wax. The wind howls around the tower like a choir that missed rehearsal. It seeps through cracks and carries tales from the outside world. You like to think it's singing to you, not about you. You tried escaping once. Got as far as the wall before a goat screamed and gave you away. You've avoided that goat ever since. You think it's still laughing. You read a lot. Mostly psalms. Occasionally herbal guides. Once a list of sinners who were forgiven after 30 years of fasting. You circled it for motivation. Then ate the page. You are hungry. Your robe itches. Your shoes are wooden. Your knees ache from kneeling. And your back pops when you stretch. You've learned to sleep curled around your regrets. But slowly, very slowly, the silence gets softer. The bells feel less like punishment, more like rhythm. The bread tastes less grey. Or maybe you've just forgotten yellow. You look out your little slit of window and watch the clouds pass like gossip in slow motion. Somewhere out there, the world spins, loud, messy, free, and yet you stay. Because here, At least, your mistakes are structured, and the wind remembers your name. Now, let the stone walls soften in your mind. Let the draught grow quiet. Let the flickering candle in the tower hallway dim and dance its last before sleep. You've walked a long road tonight through mud and moss, ash and snow, through hunger and heat and silence. You've stood in doorways with no doors, crossed swamps on faith alone, and watched the sea toss its secrets into your boots. You've endured porridge that defies joy, roofs that complain, walls that whisper, people who vanished, and people who somehow stayed. Now, it's time to release all of that. Let your shoulders drop. Let your breathing slow. Picture that crooked tavern window, glowing softly in the dark, or the owl still perched above your straw mat, blinking once, then closing its eyes. You're not in the swamp, or the mine, or the snow tonight. You're here, warm, safe, and still. Whatever place you find yourself in, however broken, forgotten, or cold, it is only a resting point, and rest, now, is all that's needed. Sweet dreams.